All right, everybody, we are live. Welcome to OWASP Oakland County, the second chapter meeting of 2020. We are being hosted by MiSec Southfield. My name is Sam Shrum, or Taco Man. I'm the MiSec Southfield chapter leader. Your OWASP Oakland County co-chapter leaders are Brad McMahon and Steve Legg, who are both either sick today or otherwise engaged elsewhere. Uh, please consider becoming an individual member of OWASP and giving your supports. Your due supports this chapter and OWASP as a whole. If you think your company would be interested in supporting this OWASP chapter, please message either Brad or Steve in the MiSec Slack. They are Null Space and Zen Mode, respectively. Other MiSec chapters, we have MiSec Jackson, meets on the second Tuesday of the month. MiSec Lansing in Detroit, meeting on the second Wednesday of every month. And MiSec Southfield and Grand Rapids, meeting on the second Thursday of every month. OWASP Oakland County in particular meets here, usually February, May, August, and November, so once a quarter. Other InfoSec chapters you may be interested in attending. ISC Squared meets on the fourth Tuesday of the month. And then ISSA has chapters meeting on the second Wednesday and third Thursday of every month. We are currently meeting in a Zoom room that was provided by my employer, Uber Ether. So thank you, Matt, for that support there. And normally I would have a counter in here for the number of days left to converge, which is very sad. Converge has been rescheduled to November of this year. Stay tuned inside of MiSec Slack, though. It sounds like the CTF 313 gang should have some content available for you soon. I would guess around June or July, but I'm not engaged with them and I don't know. Your actual speaker for tonight is Xavier Johnson, aka Infinite. He'll be giving a discussion on command and control in 2020. So, Xavier, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take over the screen share and take it away.
Woohoo! Thank you very much for having me. Excited to be here. Let me get my machine into present mode here. And then I will, woohoo! Command and control in 2020. So that's what we're all here to talk about today. Command and control in 2020 is almost like command and control in 2010. Nothing like command and control in the 2000s. So there were a lot of different techniques and tools that came out in between the 2000 2010 time frame that kind of defined command and control. And over the last 10 years, we've seen kind of some advancements in, you know, in command and control, but also like in the way it communicates, in the way that it's thought about, in the way that it's utilized. So I just want to kind of dig into that because in reality, the best defense comes from studying offense. So what's this all about? It's just a high level of what we're going to get into on the talk. We're going to talk about, we're going to get an overview of command and control. We're going to dig into the different tiers of command and controls, the different objectives that you typically are trying to achieve by using command and control, interacting with any targets, the trends in command and control, and then we'll jump into any questions that you may have. So right into the overview. Trend Micro defines command and control as a computer controlled by an attacker or cybercriminal, which is used to send commands to systems compromised by malware and receive stolen data from a target network. Many campaigns have been found using cloud-based services such as webmail, file sharing, and C servers blend in with normal traffic to avoid detection. Command and control systems used by botnets may follow any of these three models: the centralized, the peer-to-peer, and the random model. Kind of just touching on that a bit, the centralized model is what we saw kind of in the early to mid 2000s, where you saw the IRC type of botnets, where there's one central server that has a lot of processing power that's talking to a lot of different bots, right? And then you got this peer-to-peer model, which is becoming more of the normacy that we're seeing, right? When we look at how Mirai spreads, or how any of these IoT botnets work, where payload is supplied from the victim, and other victims or potential victims can go and connect to other victims to get that payload and become a victim that also starts to spread the malware. And then the random model is something that we aren't seeing too much of, but I believe that it's very intentional from the perspective of not having a lot of data on what could potentially be already happening using this model. Due to the sheer nature of it, it's just extremely hard to detect and follow. So the thing about command and control is it could be used to send commands that steal data, disrupt web services. Of course, distributed denial of service is typically coming from some kind of command and control. And at the end of it, command and control is all about maintaining communications with compromised hosts so that you can, leverage those hosts. So jumping into command and control tiering, right? Command and control tiering is the different ways in which you will interact as a operator with your different hosts that you've compromised, right? So the first tier is the interactive tier, right? So these are the tiers that you would use for in-map scan, or scanning the internet in any kind of just random manner, right? So this has a very high risk of exposure. This is kind of when you're going quote unquote loud. So just know that this tier, you're probably going to get some kind of detection, some kind of blue team response on. And so just make sure that you have enough of these types of sessions inside of your compromised host to make sure that you account for any lost interactive sessions. The next tier will be the short haul tier, right? So this is allowing attackers or operators to be able to reestablish connections that they want to continuously use, right? So this is something where you would use that covert communication channel like a Slack, or a Gmail or something like that, so that you can blend in with the target. Typically, you have a slow callback. You don't want to be detected here, right? 1 to 24-hour range is common. Then you got long haul. It's kind of the same as short haul, but it's just long and slow. So very, very slow callback times. I'm talking about low and slow, no Larry Loud. You want to make sure that this is more like advanced persistent threat, long-term engagements. This is how attackers aren't detected, for the first 4 months. On average, an attacker sits into a network and is compromising host, moving laterally for at least 4 months on average. So this is how. C2 objectives. So kind of getting into what the entire point of command and control really is, right? So in the cyber kill chain, it's the 6 down, right? So you're gonna have to do your recon, weaponize an exploit, deliver that exploit the actual service, right? Install your agent, and then that's when you'll move into command and control. And this is where you're going to issue all of your commands to your compromised servers. It's usually a compromised host that initiates that connection from whatever stub that we've installed back to the C2 server. So think about that pattern like a reverse shell. Command and control, like I said, is the 6th phase, right? So out of the 7 that we even count for the cyber kill chain, and it is probably one of the most critical parts of being successful as an attacker, right? The entire point, most of the time, is to get malware infections, and to be able to send a command and control a machine is exactly how you do that, right? So not all malware packages that will be downloaded are remote control or remote administration tools. Sometimes it's ransomware, right? So when you think about the Mirai botnet, that very well could have been dropping encryption onto all of those Internet of Things devices and rendering them useless and breaking them. So kind of digging into target interaction, popular command and control communications technique is typically utilizing DNS, especially when you're talking about a publicly or widely known DNS. It's something that, as you see on the network, you may not be so suspicious of, right? So, um, otherwise, the connectivity that's happening when you're interacting with these targets, you're able to actually identify and see based upon signatures, and this will actually go down into having some kind of signature database that's up to date, kept up to date. But that'll allow you to be able to see, some of those communications that are happening. And in reality, most of the time, what you'll see is that operators will route their communications through multiple hosts and use dynamic DNS registrations so that we can kind of hide, right? We want to make sure that it's hard to find us, but also with all of that different DNS, it allows us to be able to have a number of systems behind that DNS, which allows us to remain highly available. And kind of just digging into some command and control trends here, right? So the main indicators of trends that I typically find useful will be the code and UI, the channels, the agents, capabilities, and support, right? And one of the projects that I found to be extremely useful for this is called the C2 matrix. So if you go to HTTPS, the C2matrix.com, you'll see a page that looks very similar to this. And what I'll do is I will share that actually. And so here, if you go to www.thec2matrix.com/matrix, you'll be able to see a variety of information about the different commands and control servers that we know exist, and what we know about them, right? So depending on what you're looking for out of command and control, this is the place that you'll come and pick the different features or things that you like about them. Some people will be more interested in having something that's installable via pip, some because they're Python friendly, right? Some people will want to have something dockerized, right? Some people feel more comfortable in Ruby, and so they feel like they can make Metasploit modules, so they want to work with Metasploit. So depending on your requirements and the things that you feel comfortable working with, if you're a C# developer, Covenant may be something that you're interested in because it allows you to be able to work on the server and agent side, both using C#. But if you're a Java dev, Cobalt Strike may be something that you're interested in, albeit Cobalt Strike is not open source, right? So, but if you're a Python dev, same thing goes for EvilX and Empire, etc. If you're like me and you run a red team, you're going to want something that's multi-user, right? You're also probably going to want something that has a web UI, and potentially have some kind of API so that you can interface with the results that you have to generate reports for your customers. Um, Also, the things to think about here are channels, right? So we talked about the agent interaction. The different environments that you go in are going to have different things open, available, and or inspected, right? So to be able to have a client that's HTTP3, knowing that HTTP3 isn't widely used right now, it gives you that little edge inside that environment because they're probably not looking for HTTP3 right now. HTTP2, of course, we already kind of know the benefits there with it being encrypted, etc. And there's only so many, command and control servers that handle these different types of channels. So here you'll see, Merlin is something that has HTTP, HTTP2, and HTTP3 capabilities, but won't do DNS over HTTP or just DNS, right? Or just about anything else for that matter. So it really will depend on it'll come down to using something like the matrix to explore your opportunities and possibilities based on what's available out there, and then figuring out how to use them while you're on engagement by deploying their agents, right? So all of these command and control servers are going to have different types of agents. So a Windows agent, Linux agent, Mac agent. Some of them will be cross-platform like Caldera, which allows you to be able to have a Windows, Linux, and Mac agent. Some things like Cobalt Strike is only aimed at Windows, even though it's written in Java. So things like Empire have an agent for all three. And then, of course, you're going to want to look at capabilities. Again, this comes down to what your environment is calling for. Me as a leader and leading a team, ATT and CK mapping, the attack mapping, that framework mapping there, that's super super important for me because it makes my report writing just that much easier. I'm the one that typically writes the report. With red team engagements, you have a lot of liability and risk. So you want to log as much as possible. So having a logging capability is extremely good. Depending on the types of engagement that you're on and the type of environment that you're dealing with, or the end goal of what you're doing, you may want to have a peer-to-peer. Right? We talked about the Mirai botnet type of capability. Kill date is always important to have. These types of things. Jitter helps you be able to avoid people looking at traffic and kind of doing that stenography to actually see what's happening on the network. But most important, you want to start to look at the support, right? Seeing if these things are actively developed, seeing if they have active Slacks, and going to go ask those questions, following them on Twitter, getting that feel. And as you can see here, there's a whole entire list, right? Getting that feel for being able to work with a multitude of these command and control servers. It's kind of the idea behind the C2 matrix. So as a red teamer, I've spent some time here, and I love command and control. It's some of my favorite stuff to do. I love malware. It's some of my favorite stuff to do. And they kind of go hand in hand. And being a professional, I get these types of requests. I'll also kind of, as a cherry on top here before I get into questions, there's also a C2 matrix that is community based. And it's the same C2 matrix organization, except for they'll have a little bit more information in here, a few more command and control servers that haven't made it over into the website, just in case you want to go and look at some of these things that may not be on the C2 matrix itself. And questions?
I've got a couple.
Shoot.
So in one of the matrices you showed, the implementations, there were instances that said pip3 as well as Python, for instance. So it's like some of them were listing the package manager for the language, and others of them were showing the language itself.
Right.
What is sort of the difference that you're looking at between those two types?
That's a really good question. I can't say specifically that there is any real difference. What I think the difference is that this Mac shell Swift is written in vanilla Python and isn't able to be installed using a package manager.
In
So
your
count
experience,
there.
would it be a little bit easier maybe to work from there? Like maybe you could deploy on systems that don't necessarily have pip
Have Pip 3.
around, or by that
Right.
time, like,
That's definitely a potential, but also in reality, you're depending on the type of engagement you're on, what side of the fence you're falling on, you may or may not own the equipment that you're installing the command and control onto. So maybe you run into an environment that is Python 2.7, even though it's end of life, and you can't necessarily get a pip3 on there, or you don't want to go and install pip3 because of a logging problem, etc. The fact that this Mac shell Swift here, it allows you to be able to grab the source and actually build from source. I think is the real difference between Python and the pip3 implementations.
okay. I see Docker is in that column as well. So at that point, you're looking at pulling down a complete container, I'm assuming?
Yep, that would be a complete container, and that would be, if you're in an environment where you own your own equipment, that's something maybe that you'd be interested in doing, especially if you already have a Docker environment that's already provisioned. That may give you that edge or advantage or just ease of automation to be able to get that stood up for you.
So if you're looking at something like a Kubernetes environment, you might be able to blend in
Right.
at
But
that point.
again, this is your command and control. So
Yep.
maybe you own it and you're doing it for operational reasons, where maybe you're a DevOps guy like myself, but you want to hand this task of setting up a new engagement environment off to your senior pen tester, and you're like, hey, I understand that you're not an ops guy, so here is the Docker file, and here's a bash script. Put these in the same environment, run the bash script. It'll initiate the Docker file, and then we know we have consistent infrastructure every time without one specific person being involved with deploying it.
Okay.
That's another aspect to that. Any
Now I
other
know some of
questions?
these. I had one more.
Shoot.
I know some of these are pretty popular. Like when I listen to various podcasts, like Black Hills, Cobalt Strike will come up regularly. Of course,
Hmm.
everybody knows Metasploit.
Hmm.
How readily are these being detected? Is the first half of that question basically, and second half, like, is it a unreasonable level of effort to roll your own to kind of evade detection at the
Right.
scale that you're working at?
And that is a really good question. So, out of the box, all of these will very well be detected, especially the ones that are non commercial. Cobalt Strike is commercial. So, this will require someone to actually purchase a license to be able to generate a signature, which is happening, right? So, what this comes down to is every single time a new edit is made, to any of these tools, and a new version comes out, even if it's a subversion, it gets run in an environment, put through certain tests. That data is then looked at over the wire and associated with some signature. So as long as you have like a snort or suricata or any kind of antivirus, most of these agents will be picked up immediately. Then you have this entire aspect of people encrypting or changing or modifying these payloads that are standard, and that's usually what you see. Is you'll see a Cobalt Strike stub that has been crypted using a custom crypter, maybe written by someone, or a commercial crypter which is used to obfuscate the code so that it's hard to reverse engineer, but also making it bypass a particular antivirus or intrusion detection type of system. Another thing that you want to think about is sometimes when it depends on the amount of deep packet inspection that is on the network. So if you have DPI set up and you got a command and control server that is running over SMB or running over HTTP or running over TCP, you can see that traffic, right? But if you have something that's running HTTP3 or is TLS encrypted or is doing DNS over HTTP, it becomes harder to inspect that traffic using tools that are off the shelf. So those are all things to kind of think about. And then, so for your second question, I'm sorry, what was the second question again?
Basically, like, what level of effort would you be looking at
Mm,
to?
change your
Uh,
indicators of compromise.
no, I meant
Um,
even just like rolling your own. Like, would it be worthwhile to even implement one essentially from scratch instead of doing some of the obfuscation that you talked about?
so I would say that there's an entire thought kind of pattern around that. It depends on your needs and who you are and what you do. If you are a white hat, Nick White Hatterson, no, you probably don't need to roll your own command and control. Not in 2020. In 2006, maybe. In 2010, probably, maybe. But now in 2020, not so much. Just because a lot of this list here, as you'll see, is on GitHub, and this allows you to be able to have a strong base where you don't have to kind of rethink about how Empire does what it does with PowerShell. You just grab Empire, fork it, and go and make, do whatever it is that you want, and that's missing out of it, right? If you have that desire. What you typically find happening is that people will grab these tools, edit them a bit to change the indicators of compromise, change certain port numbers, change certain protocols in the way in which they communicate, maybe chunk out data in different ways, add encryption. And these are ways that you could use an off-the-shelf commercial tool and still kind of, CYA. So
Okay.
I would say, long story short, no, it's probably not worth it in 2020 to roll your own, unless you are doing ransomware or Sudonukabe, where they have their own custom command and control servers. But then we've seen ransomware that have come out that have been using Cobalt Strike, and so I don't think that it's worth it. I think that it just depends on what your mode of operation is. Maybe you live in a country where you work for the government and that's your job, and they've asked you to do that because they don't trust anything off the shelf. They don't trust anything that's been downloaded over the wire. They want you to build it all, right? It's almost like would you go and buy a reverse engineering tool? Sure, but the NSA will make Idra.
Yeah, definitely when you're getting to the point of nation states, that tips the scales considerably.
Certainly. And what we see is a lot of white and gray hats using these types of tools. And majority of people that are gray hats are kind of just using Cobalt Strike and Empire and Metasploit. And the rest of it is kind of white hats using these as tools for engagements. So the types of indicators of compromise and command and control communications that you find out in the wild are most of the time not on this list of the C2 matrix. They're created by some cybercrime guy because that was the thing to do at the time, or that was what they were asked to do, or that's what differentiates their product, and they want to be a competitor to Cobalt Strike but not be commercial and only be underground, right?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Yeah, that was very helpful explanations for my questions there. Thank you.
No worries. My pleasure. Any other questions? Anybody else? All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. Please follow me on Twitter, Infinite, INFENET. Add me on Instagram, Xavier_Johnson. And I'm pretty sure if you add me on either one of those, you'll figure out how to follow me around the rest of the interwebs. It has been a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. That was a great talk.